Member of the Subcommittee on Crime, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very happy to be able to welcome the witnesses here and listen to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and really find no reason for us to be here today because none of us should be in disagreement of empowering women and choosing the basis of the empowerment that they would utilize to be safe. I think it is important for women to be empowered. We need to respect the individual rights while also addressing the urgent need for responsible regulation, a concept that is very clear prior to the politicization of the Supreme Court of the United States. We can do both. For obvious reasons, I've been a strong proponent of women's empowerment. And if there are women who feel empowered by responsible, safe firearm ownership, that is certainly their prerogative, and I respect their decision. On the other hand, women who have a different perspective should also be safe with the kinds of gun laws that will provide them safety, common sense gun laws. And certainly in a domestic violence situation, their abusers should not have a gun to be able to use against them. I can never talk about this issue without mentioning Sergeant Preston in Houston, Texas, who enforces in his life, he is now deceased, that the domestic violence calls are some of the most dangerous calls that are ever made. And he lost his life protecting a mother and son. They lived, but he died answering a domestic violence call. And I always want to pay tribute to Sergeant Preston. I also want to put into the record, Mr. Chairman, before amicus brief led by the House Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, signed by 151 representatives and 18 senators, filed in U.S. versus Rabini, and just take one quote that I think is important. The only difference between a battered woman and a dead woman is the presence of a gun. So we know
Without
that.
Objection.
I thank you. We know that we have to be safe when we talk about gun use. And let me put into the record as well some statistics that are important as I begin to ask my questions. Just having access to a firearm makes an abuser 5 times more likely to take their partner's life. Over the last decade, gun homicides by intimate partners jumped 58%, and the pandemic was an especially lethal period for abuse victims. Gun homicides involving intimate partners rose a stunning 25% in 2020, compared with the previous year to the highest level in almost 3 decades. And in that year, women accounted for more than 2/3 of the victims shot and killed by intimate partners. In 2021, researchers reported that more than 2/3 of recent mass shootings were involved with perpetrators who killed partners or relatives or had a history of domestic abuse. So we have to find a balance here. And so my first question I want to ask all of you is gun storage a good common ground that we all can support, storing one's guns? Ms. Solomon?
I believe we all can agree that guns should be stored when not in use.
Yep. Ms. Wattrell?
But I also believe, I agree with Ms. Solomon, but I also believe they have to be accessible. If I am going to have a firearm in my home.
But you believe that
myself,
storage is good. Thank you. Ms. Glenn?
Absolutely.
And Ms. Alcatraz? We know they have to be accessible, but you have children, so do you believe in good storage structure?
Storage is only part of the education and training that we would do for
But
our
it is
families.
included in it. I appreciate
Only part.
your response. Let me also indicate that I have a letter from the Jewish Women International I'd like to ask submitted into the record.
Without objection.
Okay, and I'd like to also acknowledge the Moms Demand Action for your leadership. And I think what I'd like to conclude on is I believe in empowering women. I believe any hearing that would suggest that any difference between protecting domestic violence victims is untoward and incorrect. I do want to leave a topic that is somewhat related about empowering women, and I have paid tribute to her and acknowledged her, and that is the horrific reproductive rights legislation that we have in Texas that has allowed an innocent mother of 31 years old to actually flee our state to be able to save her life and to be able to have additional children, and that is Kate Cox. So when we talk about empowering women, We need to talk about all issues. Ms. Glenn, I'm very pleased to see your leadership on these issues, but I want to make sure that your leadership is not diminished. You want to train women, but you want to make sure that people know that a gun can be very detrimental. And I guess as I close, so can detrimental reproductive denial that would allow a young woman or force her to flee and to prosecute innocent medical providers who are simply trying to save lives. We should not prosecute anyone for trying to save lives. With that, I yield back.